Thank you so much, Esther, Ravi, Nikhil, for this fantastic session. And I've been off stage for 3 years, but Peyush, you've been sent to stage. And I want to introduce you to Peyush outside of work as well. So he's passionate about running marathons. He's from Don Bosco School in Delhi. He's from IIM Bangalore. He's also the chief people officer of Lenskart, and by the way, has a valuation which resembles a phone number. So thank you for being here, Peyush. But this one's very personal for me, and I want to share exactly why. In 2016, I was on the first version of India's Shark Tank called The Vault Show. And I don't have an IIT, IIM, or even an XLRI degree. So I know how terrifying it is to be there. But what Peyush did on India's Shark Tank, the new one recently, there was an individual named Kamlesh. I don't know if you saw that episode. You did, right? So for context, there was this individual from a weak background who, let alone have IIT, IIM degrees, he never even bothered asking for a loan because who would give a loan to a farmer? And Peyush said, "Main dunga." He gave a 20 lakh loan interest free. And that's the kind of person Peyush is, because for him, the purpose and value system matters way more than the financial gain. And for that, I want a huge round of applause for Peyush, please. Thank you. Okay, so now that we set context, I want to ask the most obvious question to you, Peyush.
Yes.
You're surrounded by money, right? Shark Tank is all about money. You're way beyond a unicorn.
This was not in the script.
How do you keep yourself so grounded?
I think it's the culture, right? Isn't this whole... that's what HR people want to hear. Yeah.
How do you keep yourself so purpose-driven, so grounded, and not
I think
get
if you
distracted?
set the benchmarks, what you want to do to be very, very high, then it's just, when you look at things from that perspective, it is easy to stay grounded because you still know that while for the world you may have traveled quite a lot, but from the benchmark it's still quite far, right? And at least some of the things that I want to do are easier said than done. And I would say every time people talk about this valuation of business, it just feels that only if you could come and see what my life is like. And then you would know the challenges that we deal with every day. I also think that, all glory is fleeting, and we spoke about it earlier right now, and the only thing we can do is keep working. I think the times are amazing for us to create transformational impact in India. I do think that, again, I think while so much is happening in India and so much startup ecosystem, so much evolution, I still feel India has to create some very big transformational global companies. The ones which a lot of people want to work for today, they're the non-Indian companies. And I think India can go create the big companies like they come from the valley.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I sensed an emotion there. I want to dig deep over there. So what I've observed is that 76% of leaders are burnt out. And this is leaders, entrepreneurs, founders. And even worse, we spoke to Ariana Huffington recently, and we found out that 98% HR people are burnt out. You're both an HR person and a CEO. So do you experience burnout, and what's your journey been with just burnout, and what's that journey been like?
I think burnouts can't exist for so long when you're doing something for that long, right? I think when I first went to college, the first 6 months, maybe the first semester was a burnout. But then you sort of get used to it, and I think it would be now having been on this entrepreneurship journey for over 12 years, maybe the first 2 years I would say that there's a burnout. But right now, I won't call it a burnout. I think I've at least gotten used to enjoying what I'm doing. I think if you do things that you enjoy to do, I think the burnout is only a matter of time,
I think
right?
that's so well said because Piyush, I remember discussing this with someone that stress and burnout are not a factor of excessive time. If you're doing something you don't like, even for 1 hour a day, it'll burn you out.
Yeah.
And that's so well said. But how do you even find time to be an investor on Shark Tank, a CEO, or CHRO? How do you find time? What percentage of your time actually goes in being a CHRO yourself?
Now, quite a lot, I would say, because it's it's kind of, I think that beyond a certain stage of a business, right? And I would define it in three stages. There is 0 to 1, there's 1 to 10, and then there's a journey of 10 to 100. And the reality is that the success rate of 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 and 10 to 100 is pretty much the same. It actually only gets worse. So a lot of people, uh, a lot of people think that now that my idea is working, my life is sorted, and you just mentioned that so many things successful lens card. But if you look at data, it will tell you that success actually, the success beyond that journey of 10 to 100 is actually still 1%. And, and in that 10 to 100 journey, the role of the CEO and the CHRO is not very different, right? Because eventually you get to a stage where even if you want to, and no matter how big a rock star you are or you have been, it's impossible for you to do things yourself, right? So then the game becomes about how do you effectively get things done, and and that effectiveness means even innovation. It means speed. It means all the things that you think you were doing earlier, uh, and so it becomes a game of people management and performance management. So it's not really different. So when you say I've found the time for it, it's just a better title than the CEO, and because I get to come to these sessions.
Okay, okay.
So
So
it's not very different. I think what a CEO should be doing and what a large part, I would say at least maybe 50% of the work is the same.
okay, so I want to ask you a tough question, right? Because being a founder, I know the last thing I want is take on more, right? So, what was your trigger point to actually decide to be the CHRO yourself?
So, it was becoming clear to me that companies, at least that I benchmark, and the global companies, let's take example of companies like Amazon, Google, Netflix, which have gone really global sustainably for decades, even Cisco's of the world, etc., and Levers, for example. The only reason why they have been able to do it is because they got their people grid right. They got the people game right in terms of culture, in terms of talent acquisition, in terms of performance management, and in terms of how to transition all the good that has been established in one geography to the others. Right? And if you look at each one of these companies, not one of them is same as the other. So it's not like you can ask someone to just copy and paste. You need to now figure out you need to peel the layers of what is working and preserve it and translate it forward and then figure out what is needed more. So this is not an easy job, right? And because it was the only, at least to me, the only reason or only possibility that we could come in that 1%, I thought that, this is worth doing,
Okay,
right?
okay.
And it's been phenomenal because I finally have gotten to understand a lot of things my ex-HR heads used to talk to me about. So I get some of.
Speaking of ex HR
So,
heads,
so coming to the topic, I really do think that at least I fundamentally believe at Lenskart, if we wanna go create a global, respectable consumer brand out of India, which, like, if you go to an India mall today, everybody just walks into Zara, H&M, and these are global brands. I want the same to happen for Lenskart when we go out. And so to me, if I can crack this, and I'm still learning and making mistakes, then we are sorted. Then everyone.
That's genuinely inspiring. But and this is something I think the entire room wants to hear because you've had a journey, and I've known you for 5 years. You've had a journey with HR heads. What is something that CHRO's HR does not understand when it comes to the CEO perspective? And I think the entire room wants to hear an answer on this.
That they both want the same thing, right? But somehow it is not that apparent.
Why so?
Why so, right?
Like, do you think they
I
understand?
think they want this, they want the same thing, but their ways of achieving it could be different in some ways. But I think they should just sit on a coffee with each other and start knowing what is it that you want and what is it that they want. And I think they'll both write on a closed chit and their answers will be the same. That exercise needs to happen. Uh, Eventually, organizations, all organizations want to perform. And for organization to perform, people need to perform. Now, if there are so many HR heads there, you tell me what is your goal, it's going to be this, right? And you ask every CEO, they will all say we want the organization to perform. The HR heads will say we want people to perform. They both are same, right? So somehow traditionally, you know, HR heads have felt that they are the ones who care about people and the CEOs are the ones who don't care about people. That's not true. I mean, that's not true. I think the only thing is the CEO is also thinking about that we should exist tomorrow to create care about people.
That's a good one, and I think
It's
the
like if I cracked search and everybody in the world was searching on my platform, then I can give free food, right? But if I don't even survive, then don't talk to me about free food.
That was a nice jab on Google, but I think we already have an example of Leena Nair, who is the CHRO, and she's now become the CEO of Chanel, right? But let's talk about folks like Leena Nair, and let's talk about good CHROs for a moment. What is it that CEOs don't understand about good CHROs?
That the problem is not in the HRMS.
That was okay. Hold on. That was a good one. All right, let's jump to the topic now. So we've been speaking about a winning culture. So how do you define culture at Lenskart? And I know your value system, right? But how does it translate in Lenskart? What is culture for you?
I think it is how you take decisions every day, right? And I think it is more important again. I think I think it's quite when you talk to somebody who's just starting up and you talk to them about culture, and they meet an HR, all they are thinking is how do I get rid of this guy, because it's not relevant. It's really not relevant because the culture is the person who you are guiding about culture, right? So you might as well tell him, ki boss, you need to change. Don't tell him the culture needs to change. You tell him you need to change. And then the entrepreneur would understand it. Now, as organization grows, I think uh, you can't take all decisions. And so you need a culture which will guide people to take decisions. I mean, it is almost like अब बनिया तो बनिए की तरह डिसीजन लेगा, राइट? तो वो कल्चर बनिएगा है, राइट? तो so I don't know how to explain it in
Yeah.
simple words. And because I'm just saying this because इससे पहले there was a lot of discussion about millennial and Gen Z, so I thought I can talk about a classification which is simpler to understand for
Yeah.
me. so, so I think it is how you take decisions, because eventually organizations are about decisions, right? Short term, long term, कोई गलत लेता है कोई सही लेता है, there is no good and right, good or bad, but eventually you want to get to a stage where people can take decisions which would let the organization propel further and do what it is, its purpose is. And so culture actually subconsciously is letting you take decisions, and so it's powerful, it's important, and I think if you if you can get that right, it's the only way to scale it forward. So, a lot of companies have gone global, and I'll give you some examples. We have this brand called John Jacobs, right? And it is somewhat a premium luxury brand. I think you're wearing one right now. No? Okay. I am not talking about in Fido in this conversation for sure. but, but they used to sit in the same office, and Lenskart is a platform brand and this is a product brand. And they wanna be the affordable Louis Vuitton. And I always used to have an argument about with my CFO that let's move them to a different office one floor down. And every time my CFO would say, but we have half the office vacant. So why not just use the same space? And that's the problem of co-working a little bit. But I today, and then we literally fought and we moved them to an office which had a branding of John Jacobs, different colors, and people would come feeling like they're working for John Jacobs. And they had their own culture. And then there was this discussion ki John Jacobs campus jata hai, they pay people more than Lenskart. And like, let them do what they have to do because it will evolve on its own. Now, this is a simple cultural intervention which you can do. But reality is that if you see so many companies, they try to create brands, but they end up being labels. John Jacobs this year will be like a 800 crore brand, right? And it sells more than Ray-Ban in India. And I think the success of it owes to a cultural intervention. Right? So this is the power, because then you allowed them to take decisions that way. But if they were sitting in the same office, then they would be taking decisions that Lenskart would be taking their way. And so that's why two organizations and two cultures. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, it does. And before I continue, my specs are from Lenskart, not John Jacobs,
Okay.
but that's okay. But
You
I
need
want
to
to be
upgrade.
upselling. All right. So I want to talk about some unique initiatives and specifics on culture, right? What are you doing for this? Because I've noticed all of us talk about how can we make culture a competitive advantage. Now more than ever, culture is a priority, but how? What are some unique special initiatives?
So first and foremost in these initiatives, I feel is to identify what your culture is and what in it is working. Because just like the HRMS, right? Every HR person who wants to come first wants to change the culture. You don't need to change the culture. First you need to अब वो, roots नहीं बदल सकते इतनी easily. It's not easy. And I think you need to understand that if you have gotten, and which is why I think it's not important in the 0 to 1 journey, 1 to more increasingly becomes important. If a company has gotten to that stage of 10, कुछ तो कर ही रहे होंगे ना वो, सब कुछ खराब नहीं हो सकता वहाँ पे. I mean, no matter whoever tells you and no matter how intelligent they are, I think it's important to understand what is working. And then the first initiative you need to do is to make sure that you preserve that and you accept that, because there is a high likelihood, at least in my view, that you are trying to change what you should not change. So at Lenskart, one of our biggest cultural values is um, adaptability, which is changing fast, reacting fast. And every time I look at the last 12 years and people have asked why Lenskart is doing what it is able to do, it's nothing to do with product, it's nothing to do with service, it's nothing to do with innovation, it's to do with our ability to adapt fast and change fast at rocket speed. Now, I have brought in a lot of leaders and and everybody comes and they go talk to a few people and they will tell you, "यार, सब लोग परेशान है यहाँ पे सब कुछ बहुत जल्दी change होता है." Right? And the initial instinct that you would have is to stop that. What you don't realize at that stage, you've actually stopped the growth of the company. And I'm not saying adaptability is important to that culture, but at least for us, it was important. Right? So I think the biggest initiative is to know that what is working. The similar thing that happened is that as an organization, I started this conversation that we take very, very high benchmarks. When it goes to customer service, we'll say we want to be American Express of customer service. When we go to the retail stores, we'll say we want to be Starbucks here. And I've liked to use these terms because then you can walk into a Starbucks and walk into a Lenskart and compare. If it is not there, nobody can cheat, right? But the problem is that this comes with the downside that you are always discontent because you've kept the benchmark high. Now, a lot of people would come and would say, कि boss, यहाँ पे सब गड़बड़ है.
Yeah.
People are not happy. But happiness has nothing to do with discontent. And if you tell the same people that discontentment is part of our culture and how we build, then all those people will be fine. And you suddenly stop, changing that. Because when you're building an organization, you're bringing people from 100 different cultures, and that's the toughest part. And you can decide whether you want to be a mixture of 100 cultures or you want to bring those people and then start working towards or what works for you and what works for the organization. So I think large part of what I have been doing is figuring those things out and saying, because this is not a bad thing, right? To each its own. Look at all the big companies in the world. They're very, very different. And from the outside, everybody has an opinion, right? I don't like this, and which is true. You should not. But if that company is doing what it was supposed to do, then as an HR head and as a CEO, I think they're doing what they wanted to do, and that's what matters. So the success aligns. So I think a lot of that, for example, like we really feel that if we want to transform eyewear, then we need people who do not have any experience in eyewear.
Got it.
Because that experience is the biggest, negative for us, for them to be able to think outside. And we have been looking at, okay, how do we bring people from apparel, shoes, different industries and make them think about eyewear, right? And so I think
I want to add on that, and we'll conclude shortly, but I want to add to that I think one of the best definitions...
they seem to be enjoying. I don't think they seem to be enjoying.
This red thing is flashing here. One of the best definitions of culture I saw was culture is the collective behavior of a group in the absence of authority. And there are so many micro-cultures that you're creating at Lenskart.
Simple भाषा में क्या कहना चाहते हो आप?
Chalo, I want to end quickly with a fun question. And then we will only take one question from the audience. So in case you want to prep, you can. Before we end, the question to you, Peyush, is what do you believe in that most other people disagree with?
That India can create world-class global companies and it will. I think we're on that journey, but because we have a habit of saying when one company becomes successful, then the world assumes everybody will be successful. When one company or two has failed, then everybody assumes this model doesn't work. And that's how all venture capitalist investments also work. So, but yeah, I truly feel this is going to happen more and more.
Thanks a lot. We'll take one question from the audience, please. There's one
Yes.
individual at the
Oh,
back
sorry.
over there,
Oh, he's the moderator.
and there's one as well. Whoever gets the mic first. I can't see in the light.
I got that.
Yes.
All right. So, Peyush, this is more for you. It's very rare to see a CHRO and a CEO together in one human form. Okay, that's quite a rare thing to have.
By the way, all the good CHROs can still apply. I'm not going to do this forever. So, so it seems like अभी lens card में तो कोई job.
And specifically in startup culture, as we hear, it's more of a hire and fire, and things continue. They continue to see a lot of attrition and then come and fill it up again. So while the business or the CEO perspective would be to ensure and let go the people, we want profitability, we want productivity, we want performance as early as possible. However, the HR side would be like, issue a PIP, give him some time, let's invest in coaching. So when you wear both the hats, isn't it not very difficult? And which hat you have to wear when becomes very difficult. So what's how you decide for yourself?
Excellent question. I think, to be honest, this is like everything I've heard before. And see, like, I truly believe that at the end of the day, organizations need to be successful. They need to continuously grow long term. They need to create value for the employees, for their shareholders, for their customers. I think it's easy to sit outside and judge and put tags to organizations. This is hire and fire. And usually it's the people who are talking out, their organizations are growing maybe 4% a year, right? So it's easy to put those tags. I think the role of the HR head is to ensure what that is best for the organization and for the larger ecosystem. And I think if, at least in my view, if you go with the view that, oh, no, I have to, this is where that problem, when I said they don't realize, you ask this question, they do what the same thing. But if you approach it from the perspective of, we want to achieve this for this organization. As part of achieving this, this is what we need to do today. And what is the right decision? Then these rules, then these things become easy. The problem is we put this into policies. And it's almost like when you want to do great service, policy is the opposite of great service. Because then you go into a hotel and they tell you, ma'am, this is not something that our policy allows, and you are biting your teeth that how can you be this so stupid, right? So I think it's the same thing between the CEO and the CHRO. Luckily, I can bite to each other, like, but so yeah, I do think that some of that is quite judgmental. I do think a lot of, we need to drop baggages and start learning and growing, and eventually take the hat of saying what will create the organization that we want to achieve the purpose. Then I think these things will become easier. Versus saying ki my job is to protect and this guy's job is to kill. It's not what, that is the end of it, right?
Thank you so much, Peyush. As we end, I just want to share one. Thank you.
And please, everybody, please become a customer of Infido. He has built a great product.
No, as I end, I genuinely want to tell you all one thing about Peyush, that he's one individual who walks the talk, right? You should know what he's like after investing as opposed to people who just invest and are notional investors. He's extremely hands-on. He's been a user, a customer for the last 5 years. And he's one of the only CEOs of our 225 customers who is directly hands-on involved as a CEO, co-owning the culture KPI. So he walks the talk and he's admirable. So in case you want to speak to him about investing offline, that's a separate topic. But thank you so much, Peyush, for making time. Thank you so much.